hanging from a tree for 9 nights, pierced by a spear, starving and alone not as punishment, but by choice. No cries for help, no struggle, just silence and wind. This wasn't madness. It was a sacrifice. And not to any god Odin did it. To himself. The Allfather wanted something more than life itself. Not fame, not followers. He wanted to conquer death. It's not what most imagine when thinking of gods. No lightning bolts, no golden thrones. Just a half-dead man dangling between worlds, chasing whispers from beyond the grave. A god obsessed with endings, not beginnings. And the price he paid set everything in motion. Valhalla, Ragnarok, and the strange rules of life after death. Most wouldn't survive what Odin chose. Most wouldn't want to. Subscribe to the video sharing channel before stepping deeper into a story of gods who walk among shadows where death isn't the end. And not all who die stay dead. Odin was never just a king of gods. He was a wanderer, a seeker, a warlord with one eye always turned toward the void. Ancient Norse poets didn't sing of his kindness. They feared his knowledge. They whispered about his sacrifices. The most terrifying truth? Odin's power came not from strength, but from death itself. It began at the roots of the world tree, Yggdrasil. Its branches touched every realm, heaven, earth, and the underworld, and there Odin made his deal. For 9 nights he hung from its limbs, wounded by his own spear, refusing food and water. An act of self-execution, not suicide. He was seeking something ancient, the runes. These weren't just symbols. They were reality-altering secrets, tools of fate, keys to the dead. Some believed the runes held the language of the universe. Others thought they were alive, whispering riddles to anyone mad enough to listen. Odin didn't find them in scrolls or books. He found them in suffering. Winds howled, the tree groaned. Yet Odin didn't move. No one witnessed the full horror of those nights. No one but the ravens. Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, perched in silence, waiting. On the 9th night, the runes appeared not as letters, but as visions carved in pain and ecstasy. Odin fell, not with a thud, but into revelation. The moment he touched the ground, he was changed. Not quite God. Not quite ghost. Historians still debate whether the myth was symbolic, a tale of shamanic transformation or an echo of real ancient rites practiced by cultic Norse priests. Human sacrifices, after all, were not uncommon. And some sagas hint that the rituals performed in Odin's name were not just spiritual but deeply physical, and often deadly. But here's the twist. Odin didn't stop with just hanging. He was always chasing more vision, more foresight, more control. He wanted to bend time, death, even destiny. And what came next was even stranger. He sought out Mimir's well, deep beneath the world. Tree lay a sacred well guarded by Mimir, the wise guardian. Its waters didn't just quench thirst. They revealed truths no mind could bear. For a drink, Mimir asked a price, not gold, not blood, but one of Odin's eyes. Without hesitation, Odin gouged it out. He placed the eye into the water like a coin into a wishing well. From then on, he saw with double vision. One eye looked outward, the other inward. One saw the battlefield, the other saw fate. His missing eye floated forever in the depths of the well, still watching. Unusual? Absolutely. But it wasn't vanity that kept Odin searching. He knew the gods were doomed. He wanted to delay the inevitable. Strangest of all, he didn't want to escape death. He wanted to understand it. Unlike other gods from other cultures, the Norse deities aged. They feared death. They could be killed. Odin, though powerful, was never invincible. And that made his obsession with knowledge even more intense. This thirst led him to master cider, an ancient form of magic that blurred life and death, spirit and flesh. Normally practiced by women and considered unmanly by warriors, Odin did it anyway. He wore cloaks that shimmered like woven smoke. He chanted into the void, summoned phantoms, twisted threads of fate. In modern terms, some scholars compare cider to necromancy or trance magic. Again, historians still debate whether cider was purely metaphorical or connected to real, drug-fueled ritual experiences of Viking shamans. But all agree on one thing. Odin's willingness to break taboos made him unlike any god in history. And yet, even with all his power, he never seemed at peace. He wandered, disguised as an old man in tattered robes and wide-brimmed hats. He whispered riddles to kings. He started wars with secrets. He tested loyalty. Those who pleased him were rewarded with visions or glory. Those who failed vanished. Sometimes people claimed to meet an old man on the road, alone, staring with one eye. A strange glint in his voice. Then he was gone. Was it just a tale? A bedtime myth? Or had Odin never really left? The wind doesn't speak, but on certain nights it seems to whisper. And in those whispers is a story few retell without shivering. 9 nights hanging wasn't enough. Odin's obsession didn't end at pain, it only deepened. Every scar carved something new into his understanding of the unseen world. But he wanted more than whispers and symbols. He wanted sight beyond life, the kind found only at the edge of sanity. And that's where the second sacrifice begins, not hanging, but drowning in silence. He returned to the world tree, but this time his journey led downward. Yggdrasil, with its roots piercing deep into the underworld, offered no easy paths. Beneath the tree lay a realm of fog and shadow. Here, the boundaries between thought and death were blurred. Odin entered the mists not as a conqueror, but as a seeker once again. The journey wasn't heroic. It was desperate. He sought the source of true knowledge, the well of Urd, where the Norns, 3 mysterious weavers, tied knots of fate with every breath of the world. The well didn't welcome visitors. Time itself pooled there, thick and slow. Every drop held a story, a secret, a doom, and Odin sat beside it, waiting for something that couldn't be summoned. Legend says he spoke no words for 3 days, just listened to the groaning of the roots, to the slow drip of water, to the spinning of threads that even gods couldn't untangle. When the Norns finally turned their eyes to him, they didn't offer comfort. They offered a challenge. To see fate. He had to accept it. The second ordeal wasn't as dramatic as hanging from a tree, but it was darker. It was submission. For all his power, Odin couldn't escape what was coming. The death of gods, the end of time. He returned to Asgard more quiet than before, more distant. Something in him had changed. That's when the visions began. He saw flames devouring the world, wolves chasing the sun, a serpent so vast it looped the oceans. The images weren't dreams. They were warnings, and Odin started preparing for a war he knew he couldn't win. But first, he needed warriors, not mortals, not soldiers. The dead. That's when the Valkyries entered the tale. They appeared on the battlefield when the fog was thickest, riding horses that galloped faster than sound. Golden armor glinting, hair braided in war knots, faces calm as the dying screamed. Around them, these weren't angels. They were choosers of the slain. Valkyrja in Old Norse literally means the one who chooses the dead. Their role wasn't to save. It was to select. To see a Valkyrie meant one thing: death was near. But for some, it wasn't the end. It was an invitation. The worthiest were lifted from blood-soaked soil, carried not to heaven, but to Valhalla, Odin's hall. Yet not all were chosen. Those who died without valor, or whose fate had been tied elsewhere, were left behind, or worse, delivered to Helheim. Here, something strange unfolds. In some sagas, the Valkyries serve mead in golden goblets. In others, they fight beside the Einherjar, the chosen dead in endless training for Ragnarok. But in all stories, they are silent judges. They do not explain. They do not weep. Historians still debate whether Valkyries were real women shield maidens, elevated to myth or purely divine. Some even believe they were based on actual battlefield priestesses, whose presence determined ritual burials and warrior honor, and their appearance was always sudden. No songs preceded them, no prayers guaranteed their arrival. They came only when the gods willed it. It said Odin himself whispered names into their ears, names of the next to fall. Back in Asgard, these chosen warriors called Einherjar were trained daily. They fought and died every morning, rose again by dusk, and feasted deep into the night. The goat Hydrun provided endless mead from her udders. The boar Saehrimnir was roasted each day, reborn by night. No one aged. No one slept. It wasn't paradise. It was preparation. Valhalla wasn't about peace. It was about readiness. Odin knew a storm was coming, and he was building an army of the already dead. One strange detail appears in the poems. The roof of Valhalla is made of golden shields. Its gates open wide enough to let through 800 warriors at once, and its benches stretch endlessly. A hall for the dead, yes, but also a war camp. And while the warriors drank, Odin brooded, one eye on the mead, the other always watching the horizon. He knew the danger wasn't just giants or beasts. It was prophecy. And prophecy couldn't be stabbed or bargained with. Not all souls went to Valhalla. Many wondered what happened to those who died forgotten, or those who never fought. The answer came in shadows. A realm colder than winter, quieter than the grave, Helheim. But that's a story for another night. For now, picture a battlefield, steel against steel. A figure in a feather cloak standing alone. A whisper in the wind, and a Valkyrie descends. Someone just died, and Odin just gained another soldier. Some say it was only a dream. Others believe it was the first crack in the world's armor. Balder, son of Odin, beloved by all, began to see shadows in his sleep. His dreams, once filled with laughter and light, turned into visions of his own. Death. Not just a fall or a wound, but something cold, permanent, final. No one wanted to believe it. Balder was the shining one, the gentle god, so pure that even stones and trees adored him. His smile calmed storms, his voice soothed beasts. To imagine such a being dying was unthinkable, but Odin took dreams seriously. He mounted Sleipnir, his 8-legged steed, and rode far, even beyond Helheim, to speak to the spirit of a dead seeress. He asked only one question: what fate awaited his son? Her answer came slow and grim: Balder would die, and his death would set fire to the sky. Back in Asgard, the gods panicked. Frigg, Balder's mother, traveled the realms. She made every object swear never to harm her son. Stones, trees, metals, animals, even fire and disease, all promised not to touch him. Only one thing she overlooked: a tiny sprig of mistletoe growing young and unnoticed. It was so harmless, so small. She didn't ask it to swear, and Loki noticed. While the gods amused themselves by hurling axes and spears at Balder, none of which could hurt him, Loki carved a dart out of mistletoe and handed it to the blind god. Hr. He whispered where to aim. The dart flew. It struck, and Balder fell, not screaming, not gasping. Just stillness, a silence that cut through Asgard like winter. It was the first time a god had died in peace. And the last dot Odin stood frozen. He had known something was coming, but not like this. The funeral was prepared like none before. The ship Ringhorn was dragged to shore. So large and heavy, even the gods struggled to move it. Odin placed runes upon Balder's chest. His ring, Draupnir, was laid beside him. Flames crackled. The ship groaned. A blaze that reached the clouds consumed everything. But here the tale turns. Hermar, Balder's brother, rode to Helheim to beg for his return. Hel, ruler of the dead, listened. She offered a strange condition: if every creature, living and dead, wept for Balder, he could return. And they did. Mountains wept. Trees wept. Stones wept. All wept except one. A giantess named Duckake, sitting in a cave, refused. Some believe it was Loki in disguise. Others believe she simply hated joy. Either way, Balder remained in Helheim. And something shifted in the Funde. Bones of the gods. Historians still debate what Balder's tale represents. Was it a memory of seasonal death and rebirth? A lost fertility myth? Or perhaps a story to explain why even gods can't escape fate? But for Odin, the meaning was personal. He had sacrificed himself to learn the runes, lost an eye to see the future, practiced forbidden's magic, and yet none of it saved his son. From that day, Odin no longer sought to change fate. He began preparing to meet it. He visited seers, consulted wolves, trained warriors, whispered commands to Valkyries in their sleep. And he watched Loki, because Loki had crossed a line, not with fire, not with a sword, but with a smile and a trick. A death that couldn't be undone. A crack that would one day split the sky. Loki's punishment would come, but not yet. For now, the gods mourned, and beneath the surface of the world, Hel held her. New guest, Balder, peaceful and pale, waited. Not asleep, not awake. Just waiting. And in the distance, the first signs of Ragnarok began to stir. The trickster smiled, but the laughter had soured. Loki's cleverness had once been a tool. Now it had become a threat. The gods no longer chuckled at his riddles. They whispered instead. Eyes narrowed. The halls of Asgard grew colder, even. In summer, he was Odin's blood brother, not by lineage, but by oath, a sacred bond made long ago, sealed in mead and mystery. They had once fought together, wandered together, even bled together. But now the bond was fraying. Odin had sacrificed himself for wisdom. Loki had sacrificed others for amusement. It was not the same. Still, Odin hesitated. Despite the fury, despite the pain, Loki was left free for a time. Some say it was out of love, others out of fear, but most agree it was something stranger. Odin needed him, not as an ally, not even as a friend. As a mirror, no one knew the end better than the one destined to cause it. Loki's mischief escalated. He shaved Sif's golden hair for sport. He unleashed monsters into the mortal realm. He whispered venom into the ears of men and giants alike, and the gods tolerated it. Until the children came, not mortal children, not even fully divine. 3 offspring, born from Loki and the giantess Angrboda, emerged from the iron forests of Jotunheim. And none of them belonged anywhere. The first was Fenrir, a wolf cub at first glance, but one whose hunger echoed through realms. The second, Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, destined to encircle the earth and poison the sea. The third, Hel, a half-rotting girl with a stare that chilled the soul. Odin saw them and knew. These weren't children. They were omens. The gods acted quickly. Jormungandr was cast into the oceans. Hel was sent to rule the realm of the dead. But Fenrir was raised among them. At first, he was merely a pup, awkward, large-pawed, loyal. He played among the gods, chased ravens, laughed when Thor roared, but he grew, and one day no chain could hold him. The gods grew uneasy. Odin saw the future flickering in his dreams. Fenrir, jaws wide, swallowing him whole. And still, the wolf trusted them. That made the betrayal worse. The gods forged a ribbon, silky and soft. Sleipnir, they called it. Made from impossible things, cats. Footfall, woman's beard, mountain's root. They coaxed Fenrir with games, asking him to test its strength. He hesitated. Sensing deceit, he made one demand. Let one of the gods place their hand in his mouth as a sign of good faith. Only Tyr stepped forward. The chain held Dot and the wolves. Jaw closed. Tyr's scream echoed for days. Fenrir thrashed, but Sleipnir held tight. Foaming, growling, betrayed, he was left bound in a remote place, howling at the end of the world. Historians still debate the symbolism. Was Fenrir a metaphor for chaos restrained, or an echo of real fears the Norse felt about wildness, betrayal, and the fragility of control? Either way, the gods had drawn a line. Odin and Loki were no longer brothers in spirit. They were players in opposite parts of a prophecy. Odin knew what was coming. Loki would break his bonds. The serpent would rise. The dead would march. And Odin himself would fall. But he also knew something else. To face that future, he needed every secret, every spell, every shadow. And that meant keeping Loki close for a little while longer. It was a fragile peace. A serpent coiled in golden halls. A smile hiding sharp teeth. And somewhere in the distance, a tree groaned. The world tilted. Fate turned another thread. The runes didn't appear all at once. They arrived slowly, like drops of ink spreading across a frozen surface. Odin had seen them in his agony visions carved into bark and bone, but he didn't yet understand their depth. He studied them by firelight, whispered their names into the dark. They weren't just letters. They were living things, not spoken but felt. They shaped the world, and in the wrong hands could unmake it. Unlike the alphabet, which merely records, the runes control. Each one held power of birth, of death, of betrayal, of protection. Odin memorized their secrets, scratched them into stones, blades, and trees. Some believed the runes responded to blood, growing brighter when written in sacrifice. Others thought they were older than the gods themselves. Historians still debate whether runes were purely magical symbols or just an early form of writing. But the ancient Norse didn't separate language from magic. To write was to command. To name was to own. And Odin had named death. He carved runes into the handles of weapons, into the gates of Valhalla, into the hearts of warriors. Some say he carved them into his own skin, reminders that knowledge gained through pain stays sharpest. He used them not just to see the future, but to bend it. But even he couldn't predict everything. The runes sometimes whispered back. Sometimes they refused to speak. Sometimes they flickered, showing futures that changed when observed. Like fate didn't enjoy being watched. The strangest part? He wasn't the only one who heard them. Freya, goddess of love and war, also wielded the runes. She knew cider-deep magic, and her understanding was more intuitive, more fluid. Where Odin scratched and studied, Freya sang and swayed. They respected each other, feared each other. It was said they both knew the final fate of the gods, but neither would speak it aloud. And through all this, Odin's companions remained constant. Not warriors, not priests, but animals. 2 ravens sat by him, always Hugin and Munin. Thought and memory. Every dawn they flew across the 9 realms, and returned by dusk to whisper secrets in his ear. They saw what mortals couldn't, kings whispering in fear, giants stirring beneath glaciers, worshippers forgetting the old ways. He listened, nodded, sometimes smiled. And sometimes, when Munin returned late, he grew anxious. Thought could wander. But if memory didn't return, what was left? He also rode Sleipnir, the 8-legged horse, born from one of Loki's strangest escapades. A beast of impossible speed and unsettling intelligence, Sleipnir could cross fire, sky, and shadow. Some claimed it didn't gallop, but glided silent as smoke, and Odin needed such silence, for he often traveled in disguise, not as a god, but as a wanderer, cloaked, one-eyed, leaning on a staff, testing the hearts of men, appearing to kings before battles, offering cryptic advice or none at all, disappearing into the woods before anyone could ask his name. He was always watching, always remembering. Not all gods stayed above. Odin chose to walk below. One tale tells of a beggar who asked for shelter on a stormy night. Turned away by a greedy lord, he cursed the house. Next season, the crops failed. The cattle died. The hall crumbled. Later, the villagers found feathers on the roof. Black, silent feathers. Another story tells of an old man helping a lost child in the woods. The boy returned safe, but with one eye changed, as if it saw too much. Odin never explained his visits. He didn't need to. By now, the runes were not just tools. They were part of him. They shaped how he spoke, how he thought. Every decision was layered with meanings others couldn't see. Words carried weight. Oaths carved more deeply than swords. And the more he used them, the more distant he became. Wisdom costs more than blood. It costs closeness, comfort, simplicity. His speech grew heavier, his laughter rarer. Even the other gods kept their distance. Thor roared, Freyr sang, Loki mocked. But Odin watched. Always watching, and the ravens never left. The runes began to flicker again, not just in dreams, but in real time. Their meanings shifted. Lines once clear grew tangled. Odin suspected why. The world was stirring. Something old, something buried, had started to rise. But for now, he said nothing. He simply sat beneath the branches of Yggdrasil, carving new runes into stone, as if they could hold back the tide. And around him, the wind began to change. Mist rolls through the air like breath from a sleeping giant. The light dims, not from nightfall, but from the presence of something colder, older. Beyond the borders of Asgard and Midgard lies a realm without glory, without mead halls, without songs.helheim. Not a place of fire, not a pit of punishment, just a quiet, endless winter. Here, the souls of those who died of sickness, old age, or misfortune wander through shadows. No drums greet them, no Valkyries, just silence and fog.hel. Rules here, daughter of Loki, sister to the wolf and the serpent. Half of her body is that of a living girl, pale and graceful. The other half a corpse, mottled and rotting, bone visible beneath thin blue skin. She does not hide it. She does not speak much, but she sees everything. Odin once traveled to Helheim not as a conqueror, but as a mourner. He came seeking his son, Balder, whose death had begun the slow fall toward Ragnarok. Hel received him, calm, unmoved. Balder was not her prisoner. He was her guest. And he had not asked to leave. In this realm, time slows. Thoughts move like dripping water. Some souls forget their names, others remember too much. The dead do not suffer here, but neither do they grow. They simply exist. Historians still debate whether Helheim was meant as punishment or inevitability. Unlike Christian hell, it offered no torture, only stillness. Some scholars argue it was a mirror of Norse beliefs about honor, that only warriors earn glory, and the rest are simply forgotten. But even here, strange things stir. It is said that the gates of Helheim are guarded by Garmr, a monstrous hound whose howls can split stone. Garmr does not move for the living, but during Ragnarok he is destined to break free, dripping blood, and fight to the death. Odin saw this too in the runes, saw Garmr's eyes glowing through the mist. But what disturbed him more was Hel herself. Unlike other rulers, she does not seek worship. She does not expand her domain through violence. Her power lies in what cannot be undone. She does not tempt or threaten. She waits, and one day everything comes to her. Some whispered that Hel was kinder than Odin. Others feared her more than Fenrir. She had no army, but death obeyed her without question. Once, a mortal warrior named Hatting dreamed he traveled to Helheim. In his vision, he saw a great hall of the dead, not suffering, but eating from long tables, dimly lit by the cold day. Glow of embers. He awoke shivering, unsure if it had been prophecy or madness. Odin collected such stories like coins. He visited the dreams of seers. He listened to the prayers of the dying. Every word was a thread in the pattern he tried to unravel, but even he could not step freely into Helheim again. Not without a cost. One tale tells of a sorceress buried on the edge of Hell's realm. Odin approached her grave, whispering runes, calling her from death. She rose, bitter and cold, scolding him for disturbing her sleep. Yet she answered his questions for a price. The dead, it seems, no more than the living. But they do not share easily. Odin left that encounter pale and shaking. His ravens would not land on his shoulders for 3 days. The magic of Helheim is not explosive. It is creeping. It seeps into bones. It lingers in the corners of vision. And once it touches a soul, it never fully leaves. Many fear hell, but Odin respected her. He saw her not as an enemy, but as balance. Without her, Valhalla would be meaningless. Glory only shines when contrasted with silence, and the dead only rise in stories if someone remembers where they fell. Still, Odin watched her carefully. He knew that when the final war came, she would not fight out of anger. She would not raise an army for vengeance. She would simply open the gates, and the dead would walk not with fury, not with noise, but with inevitability, and no rune, no spear, no scream could stop them. It began with a dream. Baldur stood on a cliff, the sky clear above him, the sea calm below. But the sun wouldn't rise. The wind held its breath. Then, without warning, everything cracked: the sky, the earth, the world tree itself, and Baldur fell into blackness. That dream returned night after night, etched deeper each time. He told no one at first, not his brother, not his mother. But Odin knew. He always knew. And that silence said more than any scream. Odin sought answers. He mounted Sleipnir and rode beyond life itself to the threshold of Helheim. There he found the grave of a Volva Cirrus long dead. With whispering runes, he raised her from her burial mound. Her eyes opened, clouded but knowing. And she spoke of the future, of chains breaking, of wolves howling, of Baldur's death marking the first stone to fall in a world already cracking at the edges. She warned, one more death, and even the gods will shiver. Baldur's doom came not from battle, but from trust. He was so loved, so pure, that his death was unthinkable. So Frigg, his mother, wove protection over him. She begged every element of nature not to harm her son. Stones, metals, beasts, fire all made the vow, all but one, a small sprig of mistletoe, overlooked in her search, a harmless plant. Too young, too soft, too forgettable. Or so she thought. Look, I saw the gap. He carved the mistletoe into a slender dart. Then he approached Hr, Baldur's blind brother, who stood among the gods watching the games. The gods had been throwing weapons at Baldur for sport. None could harm him. But Loki, smiling, handed Hr the dart and guided his hand. The weapon flew silently. It struck Baldur in the heart. He didn't cry out. He didn't fall dramatically. He just stopped, as if the world forgot to keep him alive. For a moment, no one moved. Then Frigg screamed. Baldur was placed upon his ship Ringhorn. Odin laid Draupnir, his golden arm ring beside him. Nanna, Baldur's wife, died of grief and was placed alongside him. Flames consumed the ship, rising high above the sea, turning night into day. Even Thor, usually unmoved, clenched his jaw. As he struck the pyre with Mjolnir, sparks flew like souls fleeing the fire. But hope remained. Hel, ruler of the dead, offered a deal. If every being in the 9 realms wept for Balder, she would release him, and so they did. Giants, dwarves, gods, mortals, trees, beasts all wept, all but one. A giantess named Duckake, hiding in a cave, refused. Some say it was Loki in disguise. Some say it was Hel herself, masking her face in another's. Either way, the weeping failed. Balder stayed dead. And the gods grew colder. Historians still argue over this tale. Was Baldr's death a myth of the sun's descent in winter? A representation of purity destroyed by chaos? Or was it simply a warning that even the best of us can fall, and that grief, no matter how wide, cannot always undo fate? Odin changed that day. Not louder, not angrier. Quieter. He had stared into the void, searched the roots of the world, hanged himself, bled, burned, wandered, and none of it had saved his son. The runes couldn't undo death. The ravens couldn't bring back time. The spear couldn't pierce regret. So Odin turned his eyes toward preparation. He began gathering the wisest, not just warriors but watchers. He whispered to the Norns. He studied the stars. And in the corners of Asgard, the air thickened. He did not speak of vengeance. He spoke of order, of the long night, of a battle not yet begun. And beneath his calm, the ground shook. A serpent stirred in the sea. A wolf snarled in his dreams. The dead turned their eyes toward the sky, and Loki smiled, because prophecy was no longer something to fear. It had already begun. They once sat side by side. Odin, the Allfather, wrapped in silence and storm. Loki, the shapeshifter, laughing like the world was a joke only he understood. A friendship forged not in affection, but in necessity. Brothers by oath, not blood, but every oath has its thread, and some threads snap. Long ago, when the 9 realms still clung to harmony, Odin saw value in Loki's cunning. While Thor smashed and Tyr strategized, Loki slipped through cracks. He moved where gods couldn't, whispered where swords failed. He was a storm in a teacup. Dangerous, yes, but useful, until he turned inward. Baldr's death didn't just shatter the golden image of Asgard. It exposed something darker. Loki wasn't playing anymore. His tricks had teeth. His jokes ended with Ash. And Odin, for all his foresight, had allowed it. Still, he didn't act. Not immediately. Not until Loki crossed one final line. It began at a feast. The gods drank deeply, as they often did. Mead flowed. Laughter echoed. Even the wounds of Baldr's loss had softened with time. Loki, I entered late. He wasn't invited. He walked through the golden hall of Asgard like a shadow wearing a smile, sat among gods like a knife on silk. And then he spoke, not riddles, not clever insults, but truths. He accused Frigg of secrets, mocked Freya's lovers, insulted Thor's wits. Even Odin wasn't spared. Loki called him weak, a father who let his son die, a god who watched and did nothing. The hall went silent. Odin's eye didn't blink. He simply said, "Enough." That night, The gods acted. They hunted Loki across mountains and rivers. He fled in many forms, a salmon slipping through waterfalls, a hawk streaking through clouds, even mist. But they caught him. They dragged him to a cave at the edge of the world. There, they tied him with the entrails of his own son. A serpent was suspended above him, dripping venom onto his face. His wife, Seijen, stayed beside him, catching the poison in a bowl. But when she emptied it, a single drop always fell. That drop burned. Loki screamed. The world shook. This, they say, is why earthquakes exist. Historians still debate the symbolism. Was Loki a villain or the inevitable challenger to an increasingly rigid divine order? Was his punishment justice or fear? Many compare it to Prometheus, punished for giving fire to man. But unlike Prometheus, Loki gave only chaos, and the gods hated him for it. Still, Odin didn't celebrate the capture. He returned to his throne. The one-eyed watcher, surrounded by secrets, he missed the old days when the laughter still sounded real. When Loki had been just unpredictable, not monstrous, but those days were gone. Now, the Norns spun threads of war. The giants gathered. Fenrir howled in his sleep, and the sea trembled beneath the weight of a serpent that could not stop growing. The strange thing, Odin still kept Loki's name in his mind, still saw his reflection in the well's waters, still dreamed of the day the bonds would break, because prophecy wasn't finished. Loki would escape. Fenrir would run free. The serpent would rise, and Odin would face them all. Not because he wanted to win, but because the end was a story he helped write, and he intended to see it through. The sky begins to split, not with lightning, not with storm, but with silence so thick it presses on the bones. The roots of Yggdrasil tremble. The ravens do not return. And somewhere, deep beneath the sea, Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, starts to move. It circles the world. Tail and mouth, a loop of fate that cannot be broken. Until now, the serpent was born of chaos, raised in exile, cast into the ocean by Odin himself. But water does not soften monsters. It hides them. It grows them. And Jormungandr has grown. When it rises, the seas will boil. When it spits venom, even gods will choke. And when it finally uncoils, Ragnarok begins. The end has been whispered for centuries, not with dread, but with inevitability. The Norns wrote it long ago. Odin has read it in dreams, in flames, in the twitch of a raven's wing. And now, every sign aligns. 3 long winters pass with no summer. Brothers turn on brothers. Children refuse to bury parents. Wolves devour the moon. The sun vanishes. It is the Fimbul winter. Odin no longer prepares. He waits. In Valhalla, the Einherjers sharpen their blades. Every day they fight. Every night they feast. Their laughter is forced, their eyes watchful. They know what's coming, and across the rainbow bridge, Bifrost, Heimdall listens. His ears sharper than any blade. His horn silent but ready. The giants march, not from the mountains, but from the frost. From Muspelheim, from realms too ancient for names. And leading them is Surtur, the fire giant, his sword brighter than the sun. He does not speak. He burns. Historians still debate whether Ragnarok was meant as prophecy or poetry. Some say it reflects a memory of volcanic eruptions, harsh winters, and societal collapse. Others believe it was a warning not about the world ending, but about order decaying when arrogance blinds the powerful. Either way, the pieces fall into place. Fenrir breaks free. His jaws stretch across the sky. One opens toward the heavens, the other toward the underworld. With every step, the earth shakes. The gods rally. Thor tightens his grip on Dalanir. Freyr polishes his blade, though he knows he lacks his sacred sword. Tyr binds his wounded hand and joins the shield wall. And Odin, he mounts Sleipnir, cloak fluttering, one eye gleaming, spear Gungnir in hand. He rides not to victory, but to destiny. He knows the end. Every rune has shown it. He will face Fenrir, and he will fall. But he does not turn, because this is not a war of survival. That is a war of meaning. Thor faces Jormungandr, the thunder god, against the world serpent. They strike, clash, scream. The sea splits, the sky cracks. Thor crushes the serpent's skull, but takes only 9 steps before collapsing, poisoned by its final breath. Freyr faces Surtur, light against fire. But without his sacred sword, Freyr is cut down. Surtur moves forward, dragging flame behind him like a river. Tyr, with one hand, fights Garmr, the blood-soaked hound of hell. They kill each other. Neither leaves the field. In Odin, he charges Fenrir. Gungnir flies straight, unerring. But Fenrir is not mortal. The wolf swallows him whole. Not with cruelty, with purpose. Odin is gone, and the battle does not stop. Vidar, Odin's silent son, rises, a god few spoke of, a god of vengeance. He wears a shoe made from the scraps of every leather ever offered. He steps into Fenrir's jaw, forces it open, and drives a blade into the wolf's heart. Silence. And then fire. Surtur raises his sword and sets the world ablaze. The seas hiss, the skies melt. The roots of Yggdrasil groan and break. Everything ends. Everything changes. And in the embers, something stirs. Ash settles across the 9 realms like snow. Not cold, not soft, but heavy with memory. The sound of battle is gone. The gods have fallen. The sky no longer burns, not because the fire is gone, but because there is nothing left to burn. And yet, from beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, something moves. Not giants, not beasts. 2 humans, Lif and Lifrasir, emerge, blinking in the dawn. They had hidden during the firestorm, curled in the forest of Hodmimisholt, drinking dew, sleeping through the apocalypse. Now they step into a new world. There are no temples, no gods, no gold, but the air feels clean, the soil alive. These 2 will become the seed of humanity reborn. This is not a paradise, but it is a beginning. Yggdrasil still stands. Scarred, yes, blackened, but alive. Some roots may be gone, some branches lost, but its core remains, beating like the heart of the cosmos. And from its limbs, survivors gather. Balder returns from Helheim, walking beside Odshar, the blind brother who unknowingly ended his life. There is no anger between them, just quiet understanding. They do not rebuild Asgard. They do not seek thrones. Instead, they watch the new world grow. Vidar and Vali, sons of Odin, also survive. Silent and solemn, they carry the memory of war on their backs, but they do not shout it. They walk among the living like ghosts made of flesh. Even Thor's sons, Modi and Magni, rise from the ashes. They carry Mjolnir between them, though it is too heavy for either to wield alone, at least for now. Together, they mark the rebirth, but something is different. The old rules are gone. No more endless feasting, no more golden halls, no more prideful gods drawing lines in the dirt. What emerges instead is a world of balance, where gods are not above men, but beside them. Historians still debate whether this post-Ragnarok tale was meant to offer hope or a caution. Some see it as a metaphor for the cyclical nature of time, life rising from destruction. Others read it as the Norse reckoning with the idea that even the divine must change or fall. There's another story, whispered only in fragments, that a new sun rises after Ragnarok. A daughter of the old sun, brighter but gentler, rises into the sky and warms the land. Light returns not with thunder, but with quiet grace. And perhaps that's the lesson. The end is never clean. But it is not final. Even Loki Destroyer, Betrayer, Shifter, may not be gone forever. Some say he will return in a different shape, a bird, a breeze, a boy who knows too much, because chaos never dies. It sleeps. And Odin? He does not return. He remains in the stories, in the runes etched into old stone, in the silence before a storm, in the dreams of wanderers who walk alone at night, watched by one eye glowing from the trees. The ravens no longer fly across the realms, but their shadow still passes now and then, in the corner of vision. Not a warning, just a memory. And so the world begins again, not with fire, not with gods, but with footsteps on soil that remembers everything. A man stands alone on a hill, not a king, not a warrior, just a figure carved into the edge of myth. His cloak is worn, his boots muddy, but his eyes, one deep and dark, the other missing, still seem to see everything. Odin is gone from the world. Yet this image persists. No body was ever found, no grave built, no god returned from the flames. And yet, stories keep slipping through the cracks of time, whispering that the Allfather never truly left. He simply waits. The sagas are full of gaps, spaces where Odin appears in disguise long after Ragnarok, a gray wanderer in a forgotten village, a stranger who speaks wisdom, then vanishes with the mist, a raven feather found beside a cradle. Perhaps this is what happens when gods outgrow the world. They return to stories. And Odin, more than any other, belongs to the tale. In the time before the final fire, Odin had made his final preparations. Not in armies, not in spells, but in memory. He had whispered runes into stone, buried beneath mountains. He had left knowledge scattered across realms, in poems, in dreams, in the minds of mortals who would never know his name. He had no delusion of winning Ragnarok, but he believed in remembrance, that when the new world rose, his story would guide not. Rule it. Historians still debate the true legacy of Odin. Was he a wise king or a ruthless manipulator? A seeker of truth or a builder of war? The sagas offer both, often in the same breath. And maybe that's the point. Odin was never simple. He was the father of gods and monsters, the student of death and the master of words. He hanged himself to learn, sacrificed an eye to see, and led a world he knew was doomed without flinching. He taught that knowledge is pain, that wisdom isn't clean, and that leadership means walking into the fire anyway. The Allfathers, Legacy is not in temples, it's in questions. Abba, farmer in the New World plants seeds and wonders why dreams of a one-eyed stranger haunt his sleep. A child speaks the name Odin without knowing why it makes the wind shift. A raven lands on a windowsill and stares too long. And somewhere, under the roots of Yggdrasil, roots still deep even after the fire runes flicker faintly, not bright, not loud, just waiting. There is no thunder, no final blaze. Just stories, stories, passed from father to son, mother to daughter, fire to fire. Stories that begin, long ago there was a god with one eye and two ravens. And so Odin lives on, not as a god on a throne, but as a whisper in every tale told when the nights grow long and the stars look back. In the quiet that follows fire, memory becomes myth. The survivors of the world live. Lifrasir, the sons of gods, the reborn Balder, carry no scrolls, no sacred texts. They speak. They remember. Around their fires, stories are planted like seeds, and from those seeds, gods are reborn not in flesh, but in words. The 9 realms no longer spin in perfect order. Their edges are frayed, realms merge, some fall silent, others awaken anew. The world tree Yggdrasil groans, its branches altered, its bark scorched, but its pulse remains, and deep within it, something stirs. The Norns, they had vanished during the flames Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld, the weavers of fate. No one saw them flee, no one saw them fall. But now, beneath the roots, a new spring bubbles up. The well of Urd, once still, now ripples again, and the thread begins to spool. Fate, it seems, cannot die. It only forgets itself for a while. Somewhere in the hills of the New World, a child is born with eyes too ancient. He speaks of things he shouldn't know, draws symbols in the dirt no one taught him. He points to the stars and names them in languages long buried. The others stare in silence. But they do not fear him. He is not a god, not yet, but the world remembers. Thor's hammer, Nelanir, once thought lost in flame, is found beneath the ash. Not shining, blackened, cracked, but still heavy with power. Modi and Magna lift it together, and for a moment it hums, not with wrath, with purpose. In time, they will forge a new symbol for protection, not dominance. And the thunder will return not to destroy, but to warn. Historians still debate what these elements meant to ancient Norse culture. Did they truly expect a world after the end? Or was it merely a comfort, a poetic echo to soothe the bite of inevitable collapse? What's remarkable is how gently the myths allow for rebirth. Ragnarok is violent, yes, unforgiving. But what follows is not chaos. It is peace, not the peace of boredom, but the peace of potential. No more thrones, no more endless war between gods and giants. Instead, something smaller, slower, 2 people, walking through a forest, rebuilding one moment at a time. In the distance, creatures stir those who survived. Not monsters, not pets, just beings. Jarmungander's children in the sea, wolves on new hills, spirits in old stones. And above it all, the sky clears. A new sun shines, said to be the daughter of the old sun, hidden away until the fire had passed. She rises, not in glory, but in quiet light. The first dawn of the new cycle. And far away, perhaps in a place beyond place, Odin sits beneath a tree. not Yggdrasil, not anymore, just a tree. A simple one. He watches the wind move the leaves. No crown, no spear, just silence and a smile, because this, after all the battles, was the point. The world does not belong to the gods. It belongs to those who survive them. Long before Odin's shadow vanished from the world, even before the runes found their way into stone and skin, the Norse people looked up at the night sky and filled it with meaning. They saw gods not just in temples, but in the stars. The Big Dipper became Odin's wain, a cart pulled through the heavens, its wheels grinding out the rhythm of time. Orion's belt resembled a warrior's belt, perhaps Thor's, standing ready to strike across the sky. Venus, the morning star, was linked to Freya, guiding souls and stirring longing even in the coldest heart. The sky was a page, and the gods were written in light. After Ragnarok, the stars change, new constellations emerge. The old ones flicker, fading like stories untold. And in their place, patterns form, less martial, more mysterious. A curved line like the arc of Sleipnir's stride. A cluster of stars like a bull catching venom Sigyn's eternal vigil. A pale crescent that seems to shift shape night after night, just as Loki once did. The survivors gaze upward, not to worship, but to wonder. They know the stars are old, but they also know they are not finished. The Norns may be gone, or perhaps merely silent, but something has taken up the loom. Threads of fate still tug at hearts, lead feet to riverbanks, draw hands together in the dark. It may not be destiny. It may only be memory. And sometimes that's enough. In a quiet grove, a child scratches a spiral into a tree. No one told them what it meant, but the shape feels right. Feels like the wind that circles, the seasons that return, the end that becomes the beginning. One of the elders watches from a distance, eyes wide, not with fear, but with familiarity. It's the same spiral etched on the hilt of Gungnir, the spear Odin cast into war. Only no one speaks of Gungnir anymore. Historians still argue over whether Norse cosmology was ever meant to be linear. The more time passes, the clearer it becomes. The old myths weren't just stories of what was, but reminders of what always is. Endings, cycles, survival. And transformation. Loki, once bound and banished, does not return in fire, but laughter is heard again, strange and sharp, in moments no one can explain. A bird steals a tool just before disaster. A log rolls free, preventing a fall. A trick saves a child. No one sees him, but sometimes, when a reflection ripples strangely, when a voice mutters something clever, then vanishes, people pause and smile, because perhaps even chaos learns that the gods of old are not dead. Not entirely. Their names change, their forms shift. They are reborn not as rulers, but as echoes. In thunder, Thor still walks. In the weight of a vow kept. Tyr lingers. In every choice between mercy and judgment, Frigg returns, and in the act of remembering, Odin breathes. This is no pantheon carved in stone. It is softer now, moving, growing. And the new world, like a child at dusk, listens. Not for command. But for comfort. The stars blink in rhythm. The spiral spreads from bark to shield, to memory. And someone begins to tell the old stories again, not as truth, not as law, but as lullaby. Because even in the new dawn, even with all that's gone, The world still needs bedtime tailies. The world turns slower now, not in time, but in temperament. The firestorms of gods and giants have passed, and with them the rush of prophecy. What remains is quieter hands rebuilding what was lost, words spoken more gently, and names carried. Like old songs rather than banners of power, yet stories have roots deeper than any tree. One evening, a traveler enters a village nestled in the crook of a forest. His coat is gray, his gait uneven. He carries no sword, no symbol, only a small pouch of dried herbs and a walking staff etched with faint lines that look like runes, but move when not watched. He trades healing for bread, stories for shelter. His eye only one seems to know more than it should. And by morning he is gone. They call him many things. The gray one, the old road, the quiet step. No one agrees on his name, but everyone agrees the weather shifts when he leaves. Some say it's not Odin at all, just a man carrying the echo of the god. Others insist it must be him returned not to rule, but to remember. In the ruins of the old world, something unexpected flourishes, kindness, not the kind gifted from altars or demanded through blood, but the simple, human act of holding someone upright after grief, of building not halls of gold, but homes of warmth, of listening more than speaking. And as this new world blooms, the need for gods begins to soften. They are not forgotten, merely folded into daily life. A black cat sits at a hearth, and someone whispers, Freya. Thunder rolls in spring, and an old man nods. Thor still walks. A child with two different colored eyes sings to the trees, and no one asks why. Historians still debate whether the Norse gods were ever meant to be eternal. Some argue they represented forces of nature, inevitable, cyclical, not bound to time. Others suggest they were always destined to fade, like the fading of stars before a new morning. But the sagas tell a different truth. They say the gods do not vanish, they become part of the people. And the people remember in strange ways. A midwife hums an old lullaby, half prayer, half charm. A fisherman tosses a coin into the water before casting his net, not because he believes in sea gods, but because his grandmother once did. Ritual becomes rhythm, belief becomes muscle memory. And memory becomes sacred. In the deepest grove, a circle of stones remains, not carved, not worshipped, just visited. Children lay berries there. Elders rest their hands on the moss. No words are spoken, but the air around it feels held. Some say it's where Yggdrasil once stood. Others say it's where it will grow again. And in the skies, new stars gather. Not constellations of kings or swords, but of footprints, of open hands, of a spiral growing outward. Even the ravens, Hugin and Munin, are seen again, if only in dreams. They don't speak now, they listen. And occasionally they leave behind a single feather, black as ink, warm to the touch. The gods were never just beings. They were mirrors, reflections of everything humanity feared, loved, destroyed, and rebuilt. Now, those mirrors hang quietly in memory's hall, polished by time not to glorify, but to remind. The spiral turns again, and at its center always sits the story. Not a sword, not a throne, just a voice, gentle and steady, saying, Once there was a god with one eye, and the world still listens. The night is calm. No storms on the horizon. No thundering hooves. No burning swords. Only the hush of trees breathing and a low wind brushing over hills that remember every step taken before them. This is not Asgard, not Midgard. It is something new, but in the silence, stories stir. In the heart of a clearing where no roads lead, a circle of runes glows faintly on stone. They are not written, they emerge, slowly, as if the stone itself remembers being carved in another age. One by one, they pulse, each one a word, a memory, a name: Odin, Frigg, Thor, Freya, Loki, Tyr, Hel, Balder, names the wind still knows. A child approaches the stones, guided by something unseen. No fear in their steps, only wonder. They kneel, not to worship, just to listen, and the runes hum, not loud, not even musical. Just present, a vibration in the bones, a rhythm from a time when gods walked, bled, laughed, and fell. The child doesn't understand the language, but they understand the meaning. Stories do not end because their characters fall. They end when they are no longer told, and here, beneath an open sky, a new voice rises. No temple holds it. No priest recites it. Just one person, retelling what was passed down, not with precision, but with feeling. The tale of the Allfather, of the wolves and the world tree, of fire and frost, of the last battle and the quiet after. In the distance, the stars shift, a flicker, a spiral, a suggestion. Somewhere, deep in the tapestry of what once was and what may still be, a raven takes flight, not to spy, not to speak, just to remember. Historians still debate whether the Norse myths reflect a belief system, a poetic code, or the record of ancient resilience. But they agree on this. No other mythology closes its book with such grace. Where most gods grasp for eternity, the Norse let go. They fall, they burn, and then, in silence, they offer the world back to those who survive. That is their final act, not power. Permission. To begin again. The child stands. The runes dim, but a single word remains. Hope. And far above, past stars and ash and silence, something old smiles, not with teeth, not with triumph, just with knowing, because the gods are not gone. They are just listening now. The fire fades, the echoes quiet. What remains is a world that remembers, from the twilight of the gods to the first breath of a new dawn. The Norse myths carried more than tales of thunder and spear. They whispered truths of loss, of courage, of beginnings found only in endings. Odin, with one eye and 1,000 questions, gave us not just war, but wisdom. Thor, storming across the sky, taught that strength must walk hand in hand with sacrifice. Freya reminded the world that love is power and that beauty can burn. Loki, the great mischief, the fracture in the mirror, showed that even chaos has a purpose. And Hel, silent queen of the forgotten, stood not for punishment, but for peace. Their world cracked, and from that brokenness, life crept in again. Not divine, not perfect, but persistent. And in that persistence, through frost and flame, through the turning of the spiral, something quietly sacred survived. The story passed from tongue to ear, fire to fire. Each telling carried the heartbeat of gods who once walked beside mortals. Each pause, each sigh was a tribute, not to glory, but to memory. And now, as the stars shift and the wind stills, the tale rests in gentle hands. Ears. So when the dark is deep and the night is long, close your eyes and let the story hum beneath your breath. Let it settle behind your ribs like an ember. Let it carry you, not backward, but inward, because the gods may be quiet, but the story goes on. And in the silence after the last word, they listen,